Hi, team. I hope everybody's doing well. It seems like forever since we've met. I'm going to do a recording on how to teach new material. And I realize some of you aren't quite there yet, and that's okay. This is just going to be here for reference. I will leave it posted to the Google Classroom. I do have Kristen here with me, and she may be inputting some information along the way, and we will also repost the lesson plan template that kind of has the guiding notes to help you through. If you have any questions after this is posted, please just email me or you can comment within Google Classroom and we will handle there. I'm going to apologize ahead of time. We are using QuickTime Player and I've never used this before, so I can't present anything, so I'll be holding up, but I have opposite, like a mirror image of what you do. So if I point to something, give me a minute to get my finger in the right spot. So we're going to start right in with new material today. So on the lesson plan, it starts at the bottom of page 2. It's drill number 9, and it says new material. Okay, this is so crucial for me to talk about because I've noticed through every cohort, there's a lot of questions when I say pre-review questions. So the 3 questions that are given there, 2 types of letters, what is a blend, what is a digraph. These are only given to you as samples. These are in no way questions that you have to use. If you're going to use one of them, you can just circle. So the biggest thing with these pre-review questions is you never ever want to tell the student the sound that you are teaching. You want to guide them. That is why it's called a guided discovery. You want to guide them to discovering the sound themselves, not just giving them, hey, we're doing this today and this is the sound. So we'll work through how this should look. So the example would be, let's say that I'm just going to teach the single consonant sound for the letter D. And it's duh, but I'm not telling them that. So where it says new material, again at number 9, and it's in bold, I would write on this line that I am teaching them the sound of D. So it would be D with the brackets around it. For the questions, I could ask, name 2 types of letters because that's very relevant for teaching a single phoneme. I would not ask what is a blend or what is a digraph because it doesn't relate to the sound for D, D at all. Other questions I could consider asking, if once they told me the 2 types of letters, I would ask that, and they answered the 2 types of letters are vowels and consonants, which they would know from doing the alphabet arc. You would then guide them further. If I'm teaching D, I am not guiding them to a vowel sound, so I want to just not focus on vowel. And I would say, great, you told me that consonants are one of the 2 types of letters. So I would continue to grow on that. A question then would be, give me an example of a consonant. Where are consonants located at in words? So you're guiding them to it, but again, never telling. For some reason on new material, this has always been one of the hardest areas for teachers to comprehend what they're supposed to do and what questions. There's no predetermined set of questions. You know your student best. But again, for like a single phoneme for D, it's easiest just to ask those questions that I've said. Again, I'll say, what are the 2 types of letters? The student would respond vowels and consonants. If they don't, you can guide them back to the arc. If they do respond, you're not focusing on vowels because that's not what you're teaching. You're going to go right into where are consonants located in words. Give me an example of a consonant. So again, I like to think of this, and I just use the analogy that makes the most sense in my head, and it's leading a horse to water. So you're leading them to the answer but not giving them. So you can lead the horse to the water but not make them drink. So you're leading them to. So in the student's brain, they should start thinking, oh, she asked me what are the 2 types of letters. She didn't ask me anything about vowels, so we're not doing anything on vowels. But you're not telling them that. You are truly just guiding them. And the questions look different when you're doing a vowel team, when you're doing a blend or digraph. But I will maybe do a side video that talks about introduction of new material once I start seeing lessons of new material and what content is being taught in those. So after you've gone through the questions and the responses, we focus on like 3 or 4 questions for this. Nothing more. And again, if you're teaching a rule or generalization, that looks different. But just for teaching phoneme, this is how it would look. So then you would turn the page, and at the top of the next page, we have auditory discovery, visual discovery, and then we have a tactile kinesthetic. So for auditory discovery, if it says auditory, the student is only listening. So you'll notice underneath it says that they can be above level and you would use a mirror. So for auditory discovery, when I'm doing the sound for D, D, my words that I put can be above level because the student is not looking. If it's auditory, they're just listening for the sound. So again, auditory, and they are listening for the new sound. And you're going to prompt them by saying, I want you to look at the mirror, watch your mouth, and repeat these words after me. So if I was doing the sound for D, D, and I know that that can be placed in 2 positions, it can be in the initial position and the final position, I want to include words that have the D sound, initial and final. I want to focus on chunking them. So I don't want to do 1 in the initial, 1 in the final, 1 in the initial, 1 in the final. I want to give 2 to 3 words with it in the initial position, and then 2 to 3 words with it in the final position. So for example, if it's D, I may say dancer, dinosaur, dungeon. Then at the end, I'm going to avoid anything with a blend. So I would just put a word with D at the end of the word. And I don't have these pre-written, so these are just pulling out of the, the top of my head. So it could be like maybe the word, I'm thinking at the end here. Kristen, can you help me? D at the end of a word. See, I'm just
read.
Like read or sled or board. Those are all at the end of the word. So that's what you would focus on, and then you would prompt them, what did you hear that was the same in all of those words? And they may say, well, I heard at the beginning, which is great. And you would recognize by putting a star that this is exactly where they discovered, if they discovered it auditory. You will learn very quickly from your learner if they are auditory, if auditory is a strength for them. If they don't get it here, it's not a big deal. You'll move on to visual. So with visual, it has to be on level. So you're using D as your new sound, but then you're using any known combination of known sounds that you can to make words with the letter D in them. This would be written in their notebook as a word list, and it's a visual discovery. So if they haven't discovered it, you would prompt by saying, look at this list of words and tell me what you see that's the same in every word. And if they discover the D, they underline it, and you would say, great, where do you notice a location? Because again, here you're going to want it in the initial and the final position. If they've already discovered it in audio, this is just used as reinforcement, where they're marking. So they're going to underline if it's a single phoneme. In this case, it's the letter D. They're going to underline it, and they're going to mark their vowel. And just like with every list that has already been, presented when you've done the previous portion of the lesson, they're going to read the list down and up, and you're going to mark it for fluency. So that's your visual discovery portion. So we've already covered the auditory piece and the visual, and we would move into tactile kinesthetic. Now there is a list given here for tactile kinesthetic of some options they can do. Let me tell you the ones that are non-negotiable. So they have to skywrite. That's a non-negotiable because that is your big motor. So that's your big muscle. Let me show you how you're going to skywrite, because skywrite is you're holding your shoulder and you're going to skywrite with your dominant hand. So if it's D, it would be D, and I want it big. D. Skywrite is not this. okay? If they need a guide and need to do it against a wall, if their arm is a little wiggly, that is fine, but they need to hold their shoulder and feel that big muscle. I don't want them supporting their arm. I don't want them holding it at the elbow. It needs to be held at the shoulder. And you're thinking here with tactile kinesthetic, you want to go from the big to the small. So big motor to small motor. So that's why you always start, sorry, there's a student outside the door. That kind of scared me, sorry. You want to start with big. So they're going to go from that big motor movement into small. And then you have some flexibility here with what you can choose. You don't need to do all of those things. But you can choose if they prefer shaving cream, if they prefer sand. The gel bag is a good opportunity for here. So just choose something, or it can be an opportunity where if it doesn't become a time issue, that the student can pick between a couple different things. I just wouldn't give them like the whole grocery cart and say, what do you want to do today? Try to limit it, and you'll find quickly that they tend to gravitate towards one or two particular things that they really enjoy doing. The other thing I forgot to mention is the moment they discover the sound, the card comes out immediately. So that sound card becomes present. If they don't discover it within visual, if they're looking and can't find it, you have to tell them. So I apologize I didn't mention that in visual. But at visual, you would just tell them, hey, this is what's the same, and you underline it, or you lead them to it. Hey, I see this in this word and this word. Do you see it in every word? Okay, so back to tactile kinesthetic quickly. You've chosen your handful of things. You'll notice there's a line for other. You know, if the kid likes Play-Doh, you can check that box and write Play-Doh. I've tried to give you a lot of cheats on here just to make lesson planning simple and easy. This is a great opportunity to put in a concept card, so you could pull that out. If they're struggling with direction of B and D, this is a good time to have that concept card out. It's also a fun time to include some technology. There are several apps that kids can use. There's a sand app that they can write a letter and then they choose a wave to come and wash the sand. Or if you just want to show a quick video, and by quick I mean like 30 seconds to 2 minutes, maybe you find a great one about the letter D. My only caution is make sure you preview any technology videos that you're going to show, because sometimes the sound is not correct. So if you bring it up last minute and think, oh, I'm going to use a tech piece, and they're not saying something correct, or you're doing the letter D and all the words they show have blends, you know, like DR is the only, then that's not really the correct thing unless you're addressing and teaching DR. The one videos that I tend to gravitate back towards, and maybe this just shows my age, or maybe it's because the 70s were awesome, I don't know, but the electric company tends to have a lot of really solid videos for teaching different things. So that's a place that I tend to go to often to start my search to see if there's something that I like. So that would be your introduction in through the tactile kinesthetic piece. This does go relatively quickly. So in this short amount of time, you have addressed all parts of the multisensory triangle. You'll notice there's a note on here that says mark exactly where they discover. I just do that with a star. So if they discover at auditory, I just put a star right there. If they discover at tactile or visual, star, and then if I have to tell them, I note. All of these, when I put the word list here, I tend to read the list twice if they haven't gotten it, just to give them an opportunity. And I try to focus on about 5 to 6 words in this list. Again, if it's a single phoneme, you're avoiding anything with a blend, but you could even do like the word road. If they don't have long vowels or vowel teams, that's fine, because you still hear the D sound and they're not seeing any spelling. You also are just going to mark any assessment information that you need for this area. Then we move into the word list, and it must include nonsense and be on level. So this list has to be on level. I usually just plan 5 words. I don't do 10, but it's on there in case you need, or if you are at a point where you happen to have 2 students and you want to do 2 lists for extra practice is fine. So on level, so you're going back to all those known sounds, but at this point they all have to include the new learning, which in this case would be D. They again read it down and up. This is written in their notebook. So this is very much review procedure-wise of what the lesson already looks like when you do a review word list. It's just a list that only has the letter D in it, but looks very similar, and it has to be just focused on that new learning. Spelling is the same procedures as what you've done with spelling in the previous portion of the lesson, just every word has to have the letter D in it if that's your new material. Again, because D can be in the initial and final position, I would make sure it's represented in both of those areas. Okay, then we're moving on to new material reading, and this is some of the students' favorite parts. So there's space here to write 5 sentences on new material reading. So when you write these sentences, every sentence must include at least one word with the letter D in it. And you can use all known red words and a combination of words using their known sounds. So you're giving them, you want to make it as heavy as you can with that new material. In this case, it would be the letter D. Heavy, heavy on review. So before the student starts reading, they're going to go through these sentences, and because D is a single phoneme, they're going to be underlining when they see the letter D. Your red words can be written in red or underlined in red so they stand out. I want to take this to note that the word and is not a red word. Also, and should not be used if they don't have the ending blend ND. This is just a common thing I have seen over the last 8 or 9 years that pops up. So just a nice chance to remind that, hey, great, we can finally use the word and. Really can't yet unless they know that ending blend. But because I've chosen to teach D, the sound D in this example, I highly doubt that this student knows that ending blend. So you come up with 5 sentences, 3 to 5 sentences. They don't have to relate to one another. That's difficult to do if your student doesn't know that many sounds. If you can make them tell a little story and relate to one another, that is good, but it's not a requirement. So you want variety here, again, in using your known sounds. You don't want to repeat like the red dog is big, the red dog got a bone, if they know the long O sound. You want to try to use variety unless your student is really struggling with fluency. Then you can do a build like a dog, a red dog, a red dog with spots, if it fits and your student needs that. If you can use more variety, please try to use that, and try to use a variety of the known red words there too, if they can handle it. So then you have them read it one time out loud to you. They need to track as they read. This should be pre-written in their book. So you're not spending time writing it. They're not looking at your paper. And you are marking if they read correctly, if they've made an error. I tend to just write above the word if they've said something incorrectly. And you are marking whether the first read is fluent or non-fluent. The second read is independent. I tell them to read it in their head. If they need to talk quietly and read it, that is fine. It's hard to mark fluency if they're reading it in their head, but you can mark that if it's taking them a long time to read a basic sentence. And then the third read is again out loud to you. So there's 2 ways you can look at doing these sentences. You can have them read each sentence 3 times. So number 1, they would read it 3 times. Number 2, they would read it 3 times. Or you can have them read it 1 time. So number 1, they would read once. Number 2, they would read once, and so on. But then they do that sequence 3 times. You just have to know your student and if they can hold that much, because you're looking for fluency here. You're looking that if they made an error the first time they read it, that there's not an error the second and third time. You also want to come up with a couple questions here to ask your students, basic comprehension questions. So if the sentence is, the dog is red, You have D included 2 times in there. You can ask, what were your 2 words that had our new sound in it? And they would say dog and red. Then you could say, what color is the dog? But you can also start to expand some of your vocabulary with students. You could say things like, can you give me an example of a breed of dog? Do you have a dog? This is good for older students especially. You may say, can you give me a color that's the opposite of red? So you start to include other language. If the sentence was the dog is big, you can ask them to give you what's an anonym for the word big, or give me a synonym for the word big. So start taking it beyond just basic comprehension when it allots for that student. Some students will not be there yet, and you need to keep it as very basic skills and very basic comprehension questions. So I think that's pretty much covered introduction of new material. Kristen, can you think of anything I've left out?
I think you did a wonderful job, but if you would like to post any comments or questions underneath this, we would be happy to either respond to them with another video if there's a lot of the same questions,
Right.
or we can respond in the comments.
Okay, that sounds great. So I will post this, and then I will do another video of how to teach red words, and then another video talking about reading. So then you will have had an entire way, or an entire begin the process of how to teach a full lesson, because I know there are a couple of you that have taught a half a lesson a handful of times and we're ready to start introducing new material. Okay, thank you. Have a great day.